Shopping in D&D tends to go between I'll just put two extreme positions. On the one end is what would be called a gamist position. Gamist is a sort of outlook on how D&D should be played that says this is a game, it's meant for enjoyment, so we do the things that make it easiest to run, not necessarily make them really easy monsters and encounters. So for a gamist, as long as you are quote unquote in town, you can just buy whatever you can afford with your money. And it doesn't matter, the size of the town. It doesn't matter where things are coming from when you buy magic items, like really weird magic items that are great for your character but pointless for the rest of the world. Because it's a game. So when you have money, you should be able to buy the magic items you want. The other extreme would be a simulationist outlook on the game. Simulationist is where everything needs to be coherent and make sense, which are two ways of saying the exact same thing. Here, if you're in a small town, you can only buy things that would already be in a small town unless you want to wait for someone to make it. And the people in the town may or may not have the knowledge of how to make the item you want. If you're in the middle of a farming village and you want a longsword, it's not likely that the village blacksmith, who spends his day making horseshoes and cartwheels, like the metal rim around a cartwheel, he doesn't actually do cartwheels, knows how to make it. He might not have any clue how to make it, and maybe he tries to make one and you get a penalty to use it. Like it's a -1 to attack and a -1 to damage, but at least now you have a longsword. So those are sort of the two extremes. We are going with more towards the simulationist side at first in Wyndhaven. This is a picture of Delver's Square. This is from Monty Cook's Tallis, which is a campaign setting. And this is the Delver's Square. In Tallis, there's a massive dungeon underneath the city itself, and people who adventure in that dungeon are called Delvers. And Delver's Square is where they buy stuff. Muraith's Oddities, you can buy magic potions and scrolls. Ebert's Outfitters sells mundane equipment. Danbury's, I believe, is a place where spellcasters hang out. Raster's Weapons is self-explanatory. The Bull and Bear Armory sells weapons and armor. Raster's sells like used weapons or magic. They resell magic items. Ghostly Minstrel is a big tavern. The Watch House is where the watch stays to make sure that the Delvers aren't too jerky. And then there's a staircase here down into the dungeon. We're not using that in this game, but it's the picture that I'm using. Although Ebert's Outfitters itself will appear in Wyndhaven at some point because I like it. So in Wyndhaven, we talked about how you can't really buy horses because it doesn't make sense that there would be extra horses available for you. They're taken. Now, if you need to buy weapons or armor, that is kind of available. Remember that they had a bunch of soldiers that died in the battle, and they probably had enough people there to supply these soldiers. They probably made sure that they had weaponsmiths and armorsmiths and blacksmiths and leather workers because they were expecting this army to stay around for a while, and they knew that they were going to need these people to support them. So there probably are people who know how to do it. They're probably desperate for the money. Not, I shouldn't say desperate, but it's not like they're so well off that they're going to say, bah, I'm not going to bother myself making stuff for you. And I mean, they might even have stockpiles that the garrison in Wyndhaven has, and there's just so much that they can sell a couple to you if you need it right away. So we've established that there are people, if you need a special item made, who have the skills to do it. We've established that if you just need a long sword, you can probably go get one from the garrison for a fee, of course. Occasionally, you don't want to. The garrison's not to stand there and hand out long swords day after day, and that's important because when you're in this kind of campaign, you want to evoke a sense of scarcity in these adventuring items. Like the guy who uses long swords is probably well set up. The guy who uses a spiked chain as a weapon, he's probably going to need to devote some time and money into equipping himself, so he better not lose that spiked chain. Now, it can seem like a penalty for this player, but for the most part, it's just in between adventures, he has the guy make him a spiked chain weapon. And you don't really have to assess a penalty on it because, I mean, we're not going that far simulationist. Where we are going to go kind of that far simulationist is with special materials. This was something that I pulled from my friend who has the horses game. It's called Iron Marches, and it kind of blew my mind when I saw it. His armorer, the guy who makes weapons and armor, has limited amounts of special materials. Now, special materials are not as important in an Iron Heroes game because, um, for the most part, the rules want you to avoid monsters that require magic or special materials in order to damage them. However, of the two, you would more likely add special materials into the game than the magic. So his armorer has a supply of adamantium on hand, and he has a supply of mithril. And as the PCs buy items made of these materials, they're depleted and they don't necessarily replenish themselves because there's not a bunch of new supplies coming in from the old world. And that and I believe at the beginning, like in his game, there's not even enough adamantine to make adamantine heavy armor. He has like 12,000 gold pieces worth of adamantine, but you need 15,000 gold pieces worth to make a suit of adamantine full plate. And I like that. And it allows you to then add these special materials as treasure in the game, finding a place where there is adamantine and then setting it up, so that they harvest it and bring it back. You don't want to do this too much, but it gives them a bit of treasure, and even they can find it but not do anything with it until one of them decides they want it, then go back and get it as an adventure. You want to avoid MMO style farming quests. Go out and kill, a bunch of these and bring back the ingredients and I can get you something cool. That should not be a massive part of the game, but it can be an occasional part of the game. And special materials where the PCs aren't going to be making, they're not going to be buying adamantine armor again and again and again. They're usually going to get one suit, and if it's a D&D game, they're just going to enchant that suit of armor, and you're going to have your magic armor, and it stays that way. They won't have to continuously buy replacements. It does, however, add up to a bit of a hit when it comes to PCs who buy adamantine armor and then die in the wilderness. You can, I guess, have the PCs go and find that treasure and bring it back, and now the next guy has adamantine armor. Sometimes you want it to go missing, though, because then PCs can just keep, making new characters. You can't exploit it this way in real life, which is why D&D is awesome. In a computer game, you can go and die, and you can go make a new character, go out, grab all your old stuff, and whatever money you may have started out with as a new character. So now you have a little bit more. You send that character out to die and repeat ad nauseum. You have infinite money. In D&D, there's this guy called the Dungeon Master who stops that. But I mean, it adds another layer. One of the things in D&D, it's not a rule of dungeon mastering, but I guess not a formal rule, but I think it should be, is when you set things up, you want to maximize fun and you want options. And so, like in the history of Wyndhaven, having the ships, a couple of the ships sink off the coast adds the option of going there for adventure. In fact, one of those ships might have had adamantine on it, and now when the guy wants to make adamantine armor, you can say, hey, I don't have as much as I should have because we lost that ship at sea, and the PC's like, hey, I know some dude who can cast water breathing, and we will go out there and get some. And now you have a little adventure, and the PCs can put it all together themselves, which is the whole point of the sandbox game. You tell them, I don't have enough adamantine. You can tell them there was a ship that went down, and if the PC feels like that's the place he wants to go to get it, that's what he does. What else did we want to talk about? That might have been it. I wanted to introduce the concept of scarcity of materials and the concept of the simulationist versus gamist feel to it. So you as a DM can use that scarcity of resources to to engender new adventures for the PCs to go on. And it can also lead to more adventures towards rare materials, not like adamantine and mithril, but rare materials like the PCs want to pay a wizard in town to enchant their items or, increase their magic ability, maybe then you can use an adventure where they go out and get some sort of needed material. Back in the old editions of D&D, that was required any time you wanted to make a magic item. The DM could require you to procure certain materials, and the more powerful or rare a magic item you wanted, the more difficult to gather the resource was, even to the point of gathering fanciful resources like a woman's beard and the breath of a fish and the feet of a mountain. And PCs would have to basically figure out a way to do that. But then they were rewarded with the exact magic items that they wanted. That's a lot of talking about not much in particular, but that's how most of these videos go. So if you have any thoughts on shopping, scarce resources, or what have you, we can talk about that. And I'll probably have another video about Edward's Outfitter, since I wrote an article about it a while back. So bye-bye.